My name is Mary Toner, a 45-year-old woman living in a quiet suburb of Ohio. From the outside, my life looks like a postcard. Neat house, devoted husband, everything perfectly in place. But inside, there's a fire smoldering, a hunger that's been gnawing at my soul for years. It's not just a fleeting thought. It's a deep, pulsing yearning that keeps me awake at night, whispering in the shadows. Have you ever felt a pull so strong it terrified you? Stay with me, because this story will draw you in and hold you close. I've been married to Mark for 20 years. He's a steady man, an accountant who pays the bills on time, never forgets our anniversary, and keeps our life running smoothly. We have a life that looks perfect, the kind people share on social media with hashtags like #blessed. But somewhere along the way, the spark between us faded. It wasn't a dramatic fight or a single moment. It was a slow dimming, like a candle burning low. I'd sit across from him at dinner, watching him scroll through his phone, and feel an emptiness in my chest. At 45, I felt like my youth, my passion, my fire was slipping away. I longed to feel alive again, to be seen, to be desired in a way that made my heart race. That's when Ethan Carter came into our lives. Ethan, our 22-year-old foster son, had a smile that could light up a room, and eyes that seemed to see straight into my soul. We took him in 2 years ago, giving him a home after a tough childhood, bouncing between foster families. He was grateful, polite, always offering to mow the lawn or fix a leaky faucet. But there was something else. Attention. A spark I couldn't ignore. The way his gaze lingered during our conversations, the way his hand brushed mine when he handed me a plate at dinner. It was subtle, innocent at first, or so I told myself. But deep down, I knew it was more. I was drawn to him, and it scared me as much as it thrilled me. So, what happens when a woman like me, starving for passion, faces a temptation she knows she should resist? I'm going to share my story with you, and I hope you'll listen with empathy. Haven't we all felt the pull of something we know we shouldn't want? This is my story. I did something I shouldn't have with my foster son. I ask for your understanding as I lay it all bare. Join me on this journey, and please share your thoughts in the comments below. It began on a sultry July evening, the kind where the air feels heavy and cicadas hum in the distance. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of Chardonnay, when my eyes drifted to the window. In the backyard, Ethan was fixing the wooden fence Mark had promised to repair for months. He was shirtless, his skin glowing under the golden sunset. I stood there, frozen, the cool glass in my hand, my heart pounding as I watched the muscles in his back flex with each swing of the hammer. I told myself to look away, to go back to slicing tomatoes for dinner, but my feet wouldn't move. There was something raw, something alive in the way he moved, and it stirred a part of me I thought had long faded. A warmth spread through me, slow and relentless, like a river waking from a long sleep. For the first time in years, I felt like a woman, not just a wife, not just a caregiver, but a woman with desires that refused to stay buried. That night, I lay beside Mark, who was already snoring, his glasses still perched on his nose. My mind was a storm. I kept seeing Ethan's silhouette in the fading light, the way his eyes met mine when he came inside, sweat glistening, and said, "Hope I did a good job, Mary." His voice was low, almost teasing, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming. What would it feel like to touch him? To feel his hands on me, strong and warm? I was ashamed, but the shame only sharpened the longing, like a blade against my skin. It was wrong, I knew, but it was also exhilarating, like standing at the edge of a cliff and feeling the urge to leap. For the next few days, I tried to avoid Ethan. I buried myself in errands, grocery shopping, cleaning the house, anything to keep my mind occupied. But the house felt smaller, the air thicker, every moment charged with possibility. I'd catch myself watching him, when he laughed at a TV show, when he stretched after a run, his shirt riding up to reveal a sliver of tanned skin. Each glance was a spark, igniting something I couldn't control. I told myself it was just a phase, a midlife crisis, something I'd get over. But deep down, I didn't want to get over it. I wanted to lean into it, to see where it would lead me. The thought was terrifying, but it was also intoxicating, a secret I carried like a hidden flame. Weeks later, things began to shift. Mark was working longer hours, leaving the house quiet, and Ethan and I found ourselves spending more time together. It started innocently, mornings in the kitchen, him helping me wash dishes while we talked about small things, the weather, a new movie, or a recipe I wanted to try. But our conversations grew deeper, more intimate. He shared stories of his childhood, the cold foster homes he'd moved through, his dreams of opening a motorcycle repair shop someday. I told him about my 20s, nights spent dancing until dawn, road trips with friends, moments when I felt invincible. There was an ease between us, a connection that felt both natural and perilous, like a fragile thread stretched taut. I started noticing the little things about him, the way his lips curved when he teased me about burning a batch of cookies, the way his fingers tapped the table when he was nervous. Every moment with him felt alive, electric, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. I told myself to keep my distance, to stay in control, but my heart wasn't listening. Each time he smiled, each time our eyes met, I felt a current run through me, both frightening and exhilarating. One afternoon, we were alone in the living room, sprawled on the couch watching an old romantic comedy. I barely registered the plot, too focused on him sitting just a foot away, his arm resting on the back of the couch. The air felt thick, as if time had slowed, each second heavy with unspoken promises. Then, out of nowhere, he turned to me, his eyes locking onto mine, and said, "Mary, you're special. You're not like anyone I've ever met." His voice was soft, but there was an intensity in his gaze that stole my breath. I wanted to laugh it off, to change the subject, but instead, I leaned closer, just a fraction, and whispered, "You don't know what you're saying, Ethan." But he did, and so did I. The space between us seemed to dissolve, pulling us together, and I felt my defenses crumbling. I could have stopped it then. I could have stood up, walked to the kitchen, broken the spell. But I didn't. I let myself linger in his gaze, in the pull of something forbidden. It was reckless, but it was also intoxicating. For the first time in years, I felt desired, and it was like a drug coursing through my veins. I didn't move closer, not yet, but I didn't pull away either. I let the moment stretch, let the tension build, knowing we were teetering on the edge of something irreversible. The tension finally broke one night when Mark was away at a work conference. Ethan and I were in the kitchen, sharing a bottle of Merlot. The conversation started light. Jokes about Mark's terrible taste in ties, stories about Ethan's high school pranks. But as the wine flowed, the mood shifted. Our laughter quieted. Our words grew careful, as if we both knew we were walking a tightrope. We stood by the counter, closer than necessary, and I could feel the heat radiating from him, like an invisible flame. His hand brushed my arm as he reached for his glass, and I didn't pull away. My pulse pounded, my body crying out for something I'd denied it for years. "Mary," he said, his voice low and rough, "tell me to stop." But I couldn't. I didn't want to. Instead, I reached out, my fingers grazing his chest, feeling the warmth through his t-shirt. It was like a dam bursting, all the longing and restraint spilling out in a single touch. Words felt inadequate, unnecessary. He stepped closer, his hands finding my waist, and I let myself melt into him. The kitchen faded away, and all I could feel was the heat of his breath, the strength of his grip, the way my body responded to every touch. It wasn't just physical. It was a connection deeper than I'd expected, a feeling of being truly seen. We moved to the living room, the shadows wrapping around us like a protective veil. His hands were gentle but sure, exploring me as if I were something precious, something he'd been waiting to discover. I felt alive, wanted, visible in a way I hadn't been in years. Every touch was a spark, every whisper a breeze fanning the flames, and I let myself burn. That night, we didn't go beyond kisses and touches, but it was enough to change everything. I went to bed alone, my body humming with exhilaration and guilt. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every sensation. I knew I'd crossed a line, but I couldn't bring myself to care. For the first time in so long, I felt like I was living, not just existing. But as I lay there, a small voice in my head began to whisper, of reason, of morality. I'd betrayed Mark, the man who'd stood by me for 2 decades. I wondered if I could go back, if I even wanted to. But then Ethan's face flashed in my mind, and I knew I was too far gone to turn back. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments. A glance across the dinner table when Mark wasn't looking. A brush of hands in the hallway. A late-night conversation that turned into something more. Each time, the pull grew stronger, the desire more consuming. Ethan became my secret, my escape, the thing that made my heart race. I'd catch myself smiling for no reason, humming while folding laundry, feeling like a teenager again. At 45, I thought my days of passion were over, but with him, I felt like I was just beginning. But it wasn't all joy. Guilt crept in, a quiet shadow at the edges of my happiness. I'd look at Mark, laughing at a TV show or asking about my day, and wonder if he could see the truth in my eyes. Did he notice how I smiled more? How I seemed lighter? I hated myself for betraying him, but the feeling wasn't strong enough to stop me. Ethan was like air, and I'd been suffocating too long. Every moment with him reminded me of what I'd been missing, what I deserved to feel. One evening, we were alone again, this time in the garage. Mark was at a client dinner, and Ethan was tinkering with his old motorcycle, grease smudged on his hands. I brought him a glass of iced tea, an excuse to be near him, and we started talking about the bike, about summer, about nothing at all. But the air was charged, the space between us shrinking with every word. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag, and stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "Mary," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You drive me crazy, you know that?" My heart skipped a beat, and before I could think, I was in his arms, my hands tangled in his hair, his lips on mine. The garage smelled of oil and leather, but all I could focus on was him, the taste of him, the feel of him, the way he made me feel alive. We didn't stay in the garage. We moved inside, to the guest room, where the world couldn't touch us. The door closed behind us, and it was just us, lost in each other. His hands were everywhere, slow and deliberate, as if he were memorizing me. I let myself go, let myself feel every sensation, every pulse of longing. It was more than physical. It was a reclaiming of who I was, the woman I'd buried under years of routine and responsibility. We didn't rush, didn't speak, just moved together in a rhythm that felt like it had always been there, waiting. When it was over, we lay there, tangled in the sheets, our breaths slowing, and I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. But when I returned to my room, reality crashed in. I looked at the wedding photo on the dresser, Mark and me smiling on our wedding day, and guilt stabbed at my heart. Who had I become? I tried to tell Ethan we had to stop, that this was wrong, but every time I looked into his eyes, my resolve faltered. I couldn't give up the feeling of being alive that he gave me. One night, everything nearly fell apart. Mark came home early from a business trip, and I was in the living room with Ethan, our hands entwined, our eyes locked in a moment of unguarded intimacy. The sound of the key turning in the lock jolted me, my heart pounding like it would burst. Ethan quickly stood, pretending to watch TV, while I rushed to the kitchen, feigning dishwashing. Mark walked in, tired but smiling, and asked about my day. I answered, my voice trembling, feeling like he could see through me. Ethan left the room shortly after, and I was left with a mix of relief and terror. We'd been careless, reckless. But instead of stopping me, that close call only made me want Ethan more. The danger was like fuel, making the fire inside me burn brighter. The days that followed were a strange dance of joy and fear. I watched Mark closely. Did he suspect anything? Did he notice how I avoided his eyes? I tried to make up for it, cooking elaborate dinners, spending more time with him, but it felt hollow, like I was playing a role. Meanwhile, my moments with Ethan became more precious, more vital. Each time we were together, I felt like I was truly living, not just a shadow in my own life. But each time I left him, I faced the truth. I was betraying the man who'd built a life with me. One night, after another stolen moment, we lay together in the dark, the house silent around us. Ethan's fingers traced lazy circles on my arm, and he whispered, "Mary, what are we doing?" His voice was soft, uncertain, and it broke something in me. I didn't have an answer, not a real one. All I knew was that I didn't want it to end. I turned to him, my lips brushing his, and said, "We're living, Ethan. For once, we're living." But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I was risking everything, my family, my reputation, the life I'd built for this flame. I started dreaming of a future where I could be with Ethan openly, where we could build something real. I pictured a small apartment in a new city where no one knew our story. Just the two of us, free to love without shame or fear. It was a fantasy, I knew, but it kept me going, gave me something to hold on to. Each moment with Ethan felt like a step toward that dream, even if it was just an illusion. Now, as I sit here sharing this story, I don't regret a single moment. What happened between Ethan and me wasn't just about desire. It was about rediscovery, about claiming my right to feel alive at 45. I know some of you might judge me, call me selfish or reckless, but I don't care. For the first time in years, I'm happy, truly, deeply happy. Ethan and I are careful, and Mark suspects nothing. Maybe one day the truth will come out, and I'll face the consequences. But for now, I'm savoring every second of this fire, this passion, this life I've found. I've learned something through all this. Desire doesn't fade with age. It grows, deepens, becomes something richer, more complex. At 45, I'm not done living, not done wanting, not done feeling. Ethan reminded me of that, and for that, I'll always be grateful. He saw me, Not just the wife, the caregiver, the woman who keeps the house running, but me, Mary, the woman with a heart that still beats, still yearns, still loves. So here I am, Mary Toner, a woman who did something she shouldn't have with her foster son. But in doing so, I found myself again. And to me, that's worth everything. I hope you can understand, even just a little, what it's like to find that spark after years in the dark. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, please leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe for more stories like this. My journey isn't over, but for now, I'm holding on to this happiness, this fire, with both hands.